Thank you, Sergey. And good time of the day to everyone here, to the participants and to the listeners. So this panel discussion will be called The Professional Responsibility of a Philosophy Practitioner. So before we start, I would like to introduce the panelists, because for those who may not know them, and because we do not all know each other from before. I hope Sergey will help me just have a quick run through the slides, so provide a visual as well, if that is technically possible. So our first participant is Lydia Amir from Israel, professor of philosophy and co-president of the Israeli Association of Philosophical Practice, lecturer at Tufts University, and relevantly for this panel, author of Rethinking Philosopher's Responsibility book. Yeah. Our second participant is Ora Gruengard, and pardon if I'm mispronouncing this, also from Israel, co-president of the Israeli Association of Philosophical Practice with Lydia. And so we have now Pia Houni from Finland. Pia is the art advisor at the Art of Promotion Center of Finland right now, and she's the president of the Finnish Philosophical Network. Yeah, also a philosophy practitioner, writer, and facilitator. Yeah. Then we have Aleksandar Fatic from Serbia, who is a full professor at the Institute for the Philosophy and Social Theory, University of Belgrade. Yeah, and author of multiple books, including of Virtue as Identity, Emotions, and the Moral Personality. Multiple other, and also president of the Serbian Association of Applied Humanities. And we have Leon de Haas from the Netherlands. Yeah, another famous philosophy practitioner and a theoretician, who is the editor of philosophical practice of the Dutch Flemish Journal of Philosophy, and a member of the board of the German Berufsverband für Philosophische Praxis, the German title of this. And unfortunately, Nikolai Amelchenko, our colleague from Russia, was not able to join us last minute today due to health problems. So we will wish him a quick recovery. But Nikolai is not with us today. And that's me, Alexandra Konoplyanik. I'm a philosophy practitioner based between Russia and the UK. And I'm currently visiting philosophy teacher at several schools in Moscow, especially at the Philosophy Foundation in the UK, as well as a chief philosophy officer for the corporate well-being platform called Life Advisor. Okay, so that's for the introductions. So I think then we can go to the actual content of our discussion. I'll give a quick intro to the topic, and then we'll pass it over to you to discuss the actual questions. Why it is important to discuss what we're going to discuss. Yeah. So there is when people talk about academic philosophy, there are lots of different ways to see what academic philosophy is about. But in terms of objectives, at least there seems to be a pretty fair consensus that it is to do with the pursuit of either like truth, if it's a grand objective, or some sort of at least objective ways to look at the world, at people, etc. The constraints, the ethical constraints which exist in the academic field of philosophy, they are more coordinated with this type of objective. Yeah. Then, on the other hand, there is the psychotherapy of all sorts and bands, where there is a quite different type of objective that is helping the clients to live better human lives, to in some form of understanding it, to experience less suffering, and that there is another set of ethical constraints which are attached to this goal and this pursuit. So, when we're trying to place philosophical practice on the continuum between academic philosophy and psychotherapy, if this is a fair way to look at it, that it shares some qualities with both of them, it is sometimes quite hard to pin it exactly, where it belongs, and how do those two possible goals should coexist, and what should be the respective ethical constraints for the practitioner of philosophy with what we can call clients here, or people who are not philosophers themselves. Because we as philosophers, we get access to quite, let's say, intimate spheres of life of a person with whom we're working. Yeah, and this, as we know from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So the question is, I suppose, like how we should see this question of power and related responsibility of a philosophy practitioner towards our clients, first of all. Yeah, there may be different senses in which we can talk about the responsibility of practical philosophers. So in this session, I propose to focus, first of all, on our responsibility towards our clients, member of the public who come in to work with us. So that's the quick intro, and of course, you are very welcome to provide any qualifications to what I've just said, and disagree with any of this. But the first question I would like to propose for us to look at is actually, what is it, like professional responsibility of philosophy practitioner in this context? How should we define it? Yeah, because we know how important it is to define our terms. And if that's okay, I would like to give the first words to Lydia, Amir. If you would like to take it and share your thoughts with us first, and then I propose the way that we go ahead is that if any of you would like to directly respond to what has just been said, you just let us know by raising your hand, and then try to pass the word accordingly. So there is no strict order. So while she's resolving her connection, is there any other panelist who would like to share their first thoughts on this, on the topic? I see Aura is indicating her. Aura, please, to you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
perfect.
A few words. I would like to distinguish between several kinds of responsibility. First of all, responsibility to philosophy, not to present philosophy as a miracle or a divine wisdom or a panacea for all problems, and present philosophy, what philosophy is, and not invent philosophy for that matter. Second is a responsibility to the counselee or to the public or to the persons we work with. And third is the question of responsibility towards others. It's whether the public, whether people dependent on the counselees, and whether our colleagues. And we have to distinguish between these three kinds of responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. Leon would like to join in.
Yes, I will agree with what Aura says, but I would like to add another responsibility, level of responsibility, that is also to society. So we have a responsibility towards professional philosophy, towards this person with whom we are, towards society. I think we are practicing in public space some way.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, we can see it in another perspective, that it's a relationship. Philosophical practice is a relationship, and in this relationship, I'm not just a philosopher. I'm a human being. I'm a social being. So as a human being, I have my needs, my feelings, my emotions, my empathy, my antipathy, sympathy, etc. I cannot deny it, but it occurs. It is there. It happens. And the second, I am a social being, so that is I I'm a cultural being. I have the values of my culture, of my family, of my. I'm from the 70s, so I have also 70s, 60s and 70s values, etc. And then, so first 1 and 2, and then I am I'm a citizen also. So when something happens with the other person, as a citizen, I have my responsibility to help, for instance, when they're a person. And then I'm a philosopher, and I have my responsibilities towards professional philosophy and towards my own way, my own school, the school I belong to, so to say. I think it's a whole set.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Leon. Lydia wanted to respond.
Yeah, I'd like to say that all these points are very, very relevant. I think the basic, the ground is that every single time when we are working with other people, we always take a first step, which is something kind of responsibility or ethical. It's open, automatically some kind of ethical issues. And I think, putting a little bit the opposite, it's also very important that we are asking to ourselves that why I want to do this, why and how I want to use the philosophy in this way. Because probably we have a different things what is running ourselves to doing this. Somebody wants to help, the other people. Somebody wants to make people be more critical, get more education. But I think it's very important to study to ourselves as well, that why I'm doing this.
Yeah. So would you say that the sense in which the responsibility of the philosophy practitioner should be defined is first of all coming from their own objective of pursuing this profession, or they should be also any general sense to do with the belonging to this profession in the first place? Where would you place emphasis? Okay, yeah, Lydia, I think, is ready to join. Your mic is off. Turn it on.
Can you now hear me?
No. Yes. Very good.
Now,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so Alexandra, can you please repeat the last question for me?
Yeah. So the past have suggested that there is more than one sense in which we can look at what responsibility of philosophy practitioner may be, both in terms of towards whom, towards the individual they're working with, the society, towards philosophy as an area, as a discipline. But also Pierre has just suggested that the sense in which the responsibility should be looked at also depends on the objective of the practitioner, why they start working with philosophy in the first place. What it is that they're trying to do. They're trying to help. They're trying to do something else. I'm just wondering. So where should we place the emphasis? What should come first? The personal sense of responsibility based on personal objective, or some sort of shared sense of professional responsibility due to belonging to this profession? What do you think?
What do you mean shared? Between philosophers? To be faithful to philosophy's goals?
Or basically some sense of professional responsibility that could unite us, not so much towards each other, but rather something that for example, we came here today to discuss it together. What it could look like.
Okay, so I would like first to address the first question at the beginning. I apologize if my computer tried to protect me and didn't allow the camera through Google nor the microphone, and I had no idea I used Zoom till now. So let me first address, if possible, the first question at the beginning of the meeting, and then this one, because I think both are important. When you teach philosophy, in a classroom, you are teaching some dangerous stuff. And because there are many people in the classroom and because it's abstract, people have some protection against truth, against the movement that you want them to do in relation to the material. But still, for example, when you teach Nietzsche, people are very much afraid. And the more you engage person in classroom and ask them to take these things to heart and to mind, the more you find the problem you are trying to address. Should we push truth regardless of the defenses that most people have towards it? Should we put a student on the spot and ask him or her to give a personal example about that, or to make it alive in himself or herself what you teach? So as teachers, we have these problems. And these problems intensified when you meet one client or two clients in a closed room. Because then, of course, first, there are not other students and they cannot hide in some way. And the pressure is very hard on them. So I think there is a play between the pressure of truth, rationality, understanding, implementing, and some kind of shadows that you allow. Going back from the concrete to the abstract would be a kind of shadow, a kind of hiding place. You use sometimes humor in order to help people implement values in a way that is ambiguous and ambivalent in regarding to this truth. You know, it's me and not me, it's my story, it's not my story, it's true, it's not true. You use all these indirect devices so that the situation would be more easy on them. But as far as the goals are concerned, I really think that as philosophical practitioners, we should be faithful, as Ora said, to philosophy's goals. And our mandate is truth. Of course, we wish truth to be happy as well. But between happiness and truth, as philosophers, we use truth. Now, our clients, are they philosophers or not? Are they students of philosophy or not? Can we impose this on them? And this is where their own behavior shows us the way. If they don't want to go in that direction, we shouldn't push so much and just let them choose as much truth as they want. Now, a last point. I think we have a shared responsibility, which I would define as philosophical practitioners, which I would define in the following way. Because it's a new discipline, it doesn't matter as how many times it's in the news and how many times people write about it. Most clients that come still do not know what it's about. It's very important, to my mind, to be transparent about the methods, about what's going on, about the meetings, about what to expect, the length of the meetings. So this is one ethical goal that I think we should all share. Also at the beginning of the meetings, and then all the time, if possible, to show where we are in these meetings and what's going on. The second point is, I think, to do as much as we can, not being guru. As philosophers, we want the person in front of us to think for himself or herself, to be self-dependent, self-reliant. We are pushing towards autonomy. It's very easy to say to people what to do. They want you to do that. They push you towards that role. To do whatever in your power, not to be gurus, to share the information, to give the tools, to make the person in front of us even more independent and more philosophically knowledgeable than it was when it came.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. I think it's a very important point about being transparent and not imposing ourselves as gurus. But I wonder if any other panelists would like to respond to what you just said. Maybe Aleksandar has some thoughts. We haven't heard from you yet. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much. Hi, Lydia.
Hi, Aleksandar.
About that paper, it's still on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I was actually wondering while Lydia was talking about how different our responsibility is from that of a standard orthodox psychotherapist. And this has been a topic of my study and research for the past few years. And it seems to me that as long as we focus on the truth, as Lydia said, most clients will interpret that as a quest for meaning rather than the truth. And most of them will have difficulty distinguishing between how meaning helps them in a philosophical way from the way in which finding meaning helps them in a standard orthodox psychotherapeutic way. In other words, most of them will simply wonder whether they have become more resilient, whether they have become happier, whether they have become gotten more initiative, whether they have all of the same things that they seek from traditional psychotherapy. So it seems to me, I don't have an answer to this question. It's just that I'm just saying this in a way of question or comment to Lydia. Do you have an idea, Lydia, about how we could distinguish the philosophical presentation of meaning in the format which is the same as the standard psychotherapeutic format?
Yeah, if I can answer that.
Of course, yeah.
Not now?
And then Leon, yeah.
Sorry?
Yes, please, Lydia and then Leon.
Yeah. Okay, so listen, this is the topic of my lecture in 2 days. Meaning is only one of the options of philosophical practice, and I think if we do use that option, it's very different from the ideal of all psychological theories have one ideal in common. It's called therapy. They cannot quite give meaning the way philosophic ideals, any of the ideals that you choose, eudaimonia, ataraxia, personal redemption, personal philosophic redemption, self-realization, authenticity, altogether these ideals are quite different than the ideal of therapy that has some meanings in common, the psychological idea of therapy. But this is only one way of philosophical practice that we might go. Providing meaning and using ideas has been criticized. First, some people said that meaning are a lie, that actually if you look at reality more closely, you see that it's tragic, and that actually our role as philosophers is to help people with a more lucid view of reality and inoculate them with regard to reality and help them have a closer look, prepare them for the very, very terrible shock that reality is when you look at it with open eye. So this is one option, tragic philosophy saying that meaning is a lie. The other option is that some people say that ideas being predicated on some kind of general human nature are ineffective. This is, if you want, a Montaigne view that everyone has to educate one's judgment according to one's means and not use general philosophic theories or views, because these are going to be ineffective. Then you have Montaigne is rather cheerful about this goal, and he shows how to educate one's judgment. Then you have Lev Shestov issue, which is quite pessimistic. It says that actually when there is a tragedy, a personal happening in one's life, philosophy is ineffective. Reason is ineffective. We are actually isolated by our misery. So in that case, we have to think what philosophy can bring if we don't want to go into religion or literature. And my own version of these views is a kind of cheerful view of the tragic philosophy that I presented before that. So it's meaning, tragic philosophy, or educating one's judgment, or considering ideas ineffective or meaning in philosophy ineffective when actually tragedy occurs.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to take a word, and then we would go to Aura. It's okay.
Leon.
Yeah. First, let's go to Leon, and then Aura.
Yeah.
Okay. Please.
Yeah, I want to say something about the comparison between philosophical practice and psychotherapy. I think it is a mistake that Achenbach made in the 1980s when his kind of practice had this form of psychotherapy, this privacy, this confidentiality, this setting with two persons in a private room. Philosophical practice was not started with Achenbach. It started in the 1920s with Leonard Nelson in Germany. And then it was a kind of public practice in the educational context. And then then a new start came in the 1960s and 70s in the United States, in England, in the Netherlands also. And then it was a social practice. It was practice in the public sphere. And then confidentiality and so on. There was not a point philosophical scene between humans, of course, but philosophy, because philosophy was not, philosophical practice was not the other psychotherapy or the better psychotherapy. This focus on psychic problems, that's the problem, I think.
Okay, so how would you propose to address this problem?
Yeah, it's about the philosophical quality of philosophical practice. What is philosophy? Is philosophy giving answers to psychic problems, solutions to psychic problems, or is philosophy a matter of questioning truth? In our case, questioning truth in the story of the other person we are with, or the other persons.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about truth or about psychic problems?
Yeah. So in terms of like kind of practical demarcation, yeah, if we decide that, for example, we do not want to go one way but want to go another way, do you think that this kind of choice should stay with the individual philosophy practitioner and this kind of awareness of what they're after, or this is a more kind of a communal decision? As you have said, what the idea of what philosophy practice is has evolved over time.
I think philosophical practice as working on truth, concepts or statements, is always embedded. It's embedded in something. For instance, in education, or in a meeting in a philosophical cafe, or in the school, or in a company, or in a counseling setting. But then there is a different. I have done that for 30 years. But then there is a difference between me being the counselor and me being the philosopher.
Yeah.
And there are other ethics involved then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, the idea of embedment is very important.
Okay. So that basically the ethics may reside not with the very idea of philosophy as practice, but rather like where it is embedded, as you say, at any given moment. Yeah. Okay. Or wanted to take the word. Yeah. Would you like to?
First, I want to relate to the discussion between Sasha, Alexandra, and Lydia. I wouldn't try to make such distinctions between philosophy and psychotherapy, because studying psychology and exploring the presuppositions of psychotherapist leaders, they share many of our presupposition of what they should do. And as we have different opinions about philosophy and what philosophy should do or should aim at, should explore, they also do. So for instance, Lydia, I think that Freud would personally share your tragicomic a vision of life, and the one who is working from behavioristic is not interested in meaning, and so forth and so on. So from my perspective, the difference is there are several differences. One of them is that in psychotherapy they usually assume or presuppose that something is wrong in the thinking of the patient and somehow should be corrected. I don't go into details. It starts with Locke's philosophy and perhaps Montaigne irony, and with we don't have to. I think we don't have to presuppose that our counselors are stupid and we have to correct them. And they don't see a solution to the problem, to the issues that intrigue them, but that doesn't mean that they are stupid, because many philosophers are also tackling problems that they don't know how to solve. So the processes that we do evoke should be different than the processes in psychotherapy. But it's not that we have different philosophy of life or different aims or different this. We are so varied among us that, and psychotherapists are so varied among them that any such attempt, I think, is not going to work. But whatever we do, I think we should remember that philosophy is first of all, a mistrust for unjustified claim to knowledge. I think this is the common thing among us philosophers, and I think that modesty is imposed upon us. We are not the knowers. In a deep sense, we don't know. When I am with a person, I don't know this person. I don't know that he is wrong. I don't know that he is stupid. I don't know that he's subconscious or unconscious or is working like this or that. I don't know that. And I have to find out. I have to explore with him. And I think this is the basic point of ethics in philosophical counseling, is remember that we are exploring together and we are not the knowers and not everything is allowed. And we are not pushing to autonomy, because pushing to autonomy is an oxymoron, Lydia, to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a sense, demonstrating the virtue of intellectual humility ourselves. Okay. Yeah, it's thank you. Pia wanted to take word, please. We need to turn on your microphone.
Okay, yes. So many good ideas around, our speeches. And I think, probably we're going to go forward with that. I think, the one problem is that we don't have any, the common list of principles of ethics. What do we follow? Something like that. So this means that we have a lot of variations. People created step by step, these kind of points. And probably we have some kind of cultural diversity as well, which is also very, important when we are talking about working with the people or the ethical issues. But I want to share very shortly about what I like very, very much. I found this from because now we're talking about the psychologist and psychotherapy and so on, and probably that's the one area that we try to look at like a parallel when we're talking about how to working as a philosophical practice. And this is very, very interesting one, because they have an American psychologist, they have ethical principles of psychologists and code of conduct, and there is the one single point, and it's the title of this is the Standard 304, Avoiding Harm. Avoiding harm. What a wonderful idea to approach about the ethical questions. Can I read this very quickly to you?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yes, please.
Because probably you can find, something valuable to the philosophical practice. There is 2 points very shortly. Psychologists take reasonable steps to avoid harming their clients, patients, students, supervisors, research participants, organizational clients, and others with whom they work, and to minimize harm where it's foreseeable and unavoidable. The second point, psychologists do not participate in, facilitate, assist, or otherwise engage in torture, define it as many acts by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person or in any other cruel, inhuman, or degrading behavior that violates.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Leon, please. Yeah.
A question to Pia. We know that in psychotherapy there is the confrontational method. So yes. In this method you can you can pass borders of not harming.
Yeah.
And of course, also there are colleagues in philosophical practice who think that breaking one's mind, so to say, is an important goal of doing philosophical practice.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting problem.
Absolutely, that's the point. Because when I read these two little things, I started to thinking about that. Where is the limit or border, how you want to describe it? That when you're going over that, it makes harm. It's harming to the other people, and it's not maybe the good anymore. I think it's very sensitive area, because I understand that, that when you're working with other person and you can maybe breaking down about, their walls, that it might help to people understand themselves better, or going forward to question about truth. But is there the area that you can maybe make more harm or the good things? I don't know, but that's something I think we really should talking together. I think it's huge important. Yeah, good question, Leon.
Passing to Alexandra, just to say those who are asking questions, we will leave some time for questions towards the end. To Alexandra, please.
Yes, I'd like to simply connect to what Pia and Leon have said. I think we haven't really been fully aware, at least the people I work with closely, philosophical practitioners, we haven't been sufficiently closely aware of a move which is underway at the moment, and that is a move of philosophizing psychotherapy. Initially we were all preoccupied with this question of whether there would be a turf conflict between traditional psychotherapy and philosophical practice, and this happened in America. This didn't happen in Eastern Europe. The situations were different in different parts of the world. But we haven't really been fully aware of the fact that many psychotherapists are now becoming increasingly philosophical. And many psychotherapists, especially the more enlightened ones, have embraced philosophy as the very substance of what they do. And I increasingly meet psychotherapists who can't understand why philosophers don't see themselves as psychotherapists, because they say, okay, I'm not a philosopher by training. Unfortunately, I'm not. But all I do is really philosophy because this is what my clients need. Look at the disciplinary changes in studying various psychotherapeutic schools and traditions now. I mean, the seminal modern psychotherapeutic school, psychoanalysis, is almost not studied in psychology departments anymore. It's moving to philosophy departments. Psychoanalysis as a paradigm, as a theoretical paradigm, is increasingly found in philosophy departments, not in psychology departments. Not everywhere, but increasingly so. Many founders of traditional psychotherapeutic schools, such as Eric Berne of the transactional analysis, and many other founders define themselves as philosophers. Berne believed that he was a phenomenological philosopher. He defined himself as a phenomenologist, not a psychotherapist. So I think this may be something to consider, because the integrative way of thinking is taking over in medicine. It is taking over in many other fields of humanities. And it seems to me that we are in a unique position to be particularly integrative in the way we are, because we are inclusive of different views, of different theories, of different philosophical viewpoints, of different value systems. And this is something that lends itself readily to psychotherapy and to helping professions generally. So I wonder to what extent we should really focus on these concepts of therapy versus non-therapy, curing versus seeking the truth. I wonder to what extent these goals are mutually incompatible. I wonder, I don't have answers.
Yeah. Before I pass the word to Leon, Alexandra, just a quick one. So in light of what you've just said, do you think that the ethical constraints that psychotherapists impose on themselves, such as the ones that Pierre has quoted, should apply to philosophers as well, given that we are coming closer together, like, for example, avoiding harm? Is it equally relevant to us in this light, or is it still something quite different? Should we care about that?
Yeah. To what extent do we really understand the meaning of the ethical precept "do not do harm"? I understand what it means in terms of surgery. Okay, don't perform surgery which will debilitate someone. Don't operate on a tumor if you will kill the patient, right? Let them live the rest of their lives. I understand that principle in that context, but I completely fail to understand the exact limitations of that concept in psychotherapy. Look at psychoanalysis. There is a basic principle in psychoanalysis which says successful therapy hystericizes the client first, which means you need to first hysteriциze the client in order to make the client susceptible to change and to facilitate the conditions where the client can improve, right? So this is a very flexible concept, making someone worse. Yes, and there's this idea, of improvement and change, which people often have when they come to us, as well as when they come to psychotherapists. They come to us and they say, okay, I would like to change in a certain respect. We don't tell them how to change. They want to change. They have issues. They have problems. Now, if they want to change, there's a negative and a positive aspect of change. In order for me to change, I must first be unhappy with the way I am. And I may need to understand all the dimensions of my unhappiness. And that may be interpreted or may appear as a temporary worsening of my situation. So does the therapist do me harm by analyzing me, by going through this with me? Well, we can look at it in different ways, right?
Thank you. Then Leon and then Lydia. Yeah, Leon, please.
Yes. Of course, Aleksandar has right. It's not about the opposition between philosophy and psychotherapy. The opposition is inside philosophy itself. I think the question is, it's about what are we doing as philosophers? Are we making statements? Are we making true statements? For instance, about the issue of our client or participant, that's on the other side, or on the one side, on the other side, or are we questioning such statements? That's an opposition inside philosophy itself, and we see that it is also an opposition in psychotherapy and psychology. And I opt for the philosophy as questioning truth claims. True knowledge.
Yeah. In this context, do you think there is, if such questioning may, potentially bring out? So, is it even applicable, this concept of avoiding harm to this questioning? Should this question have any limit?
Doing harm, yes. For me, the limit of doing harm, I do not harm, not because I'm a philosopher, but because I'm a human being, because that's how my parents raised me.
Okay.
And some persons have been raised otherwise.
Okay.
They like to harm.
So these ethical constraints would rather harm from your kind of personal constraints rather than professional ones.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Lydia, and then the microphone maybe need to turn back on.
Lydia, we don't hear you.
I think the question that Aleksandar is raising is very. I think it's very important because as a human being, I don't know if I do not try not to harm. Sometimes I harm and I don't mean to do so. But philosophy as a discipline is a very offensive discipline. Look at its history. Look at Socrates. Look at how Plato in the Republic, on another dialogue, I think, when he talks about Thales and the Thracian servant that was laughing as Thales was falling in the well, how he portrays philosophy as the enemy of society. Society would laugh at the philosopher, and the philosopher laughs at society. And if society could, it would kill the philosopher. So philosophical values or ideals are opposed generally to societal values. Societal values of happiness are actually those of success, to be famous, to have power, to have sensual pleasures. Historically, philosophy goes for other ideals all the time, and it's offensive to the general sensibilities and to all previous education and positions of the person who comes. It's true, as Ora said, we don't come with truth. We can explore together. But if we are enlightened by philosophies, views, ideals, and missions, it's an offensive discipline as regard normal people raised by societal values. Just the idea to revise these together is, in a way, first harmful. When harmful is defined according to society of what is powerful or not. Let's talk about business men. You know, if you have to be in power all the time, in control of the time, you cannot show weakness. You cannot acknowledge human weakness. You cannot advance. You have to go against everything you studied in business schools in order to make some steps in philosophical consciousness. Isn't it so?
Mm-hmm. A quick clarification. So do you think that, is it possible to anyway separate staying offensive towards the status quo of a society and, maybe not necessarily being as offensive towards the single individual who comes to the philosopher seeking something which is like maybe closer to therapy, or is it unavoidable that one will lead to another? Basically, does philosopher have to change their mode of behavior depending whether they're attacking that status quo and whether they're dealing with a single individual with their vulnerabilities?
But that's it. This is the problem. Values and opinions are not something you hold as a collection in a closet. This is part of you. This is why Nietzsche's view was considered so offensive even to himself, because he had to destroy everything. He was very radical. I'm not talking about destroying. I have devised a way that is much more friendly, through humor, through internal dialogue or plurilogue, so you can hear various voices. And the indirect way of using a lot of self-referential humor. But let's face it, unless we bring what philosophy offers, an alternative, if you want, even if piecemeal engineering, if slowly done, if very empathically presented, if electively chosen, but still, this is the alternative we are bringing. This we have what we have. Philosophy always offered itself as an alternative, not only to existing society, but also to established religion. In that sense, we are, as philosophers, offensive. As a human being, I try my best to mediate between philosophy offensiveness and the person that is in front of me.
Okay, thank you. Pia, then Ora. Pia, hand up first. Yeah.
Okay. I like it also very much about this Aleksandar point, lucky me that I'm not a heart surgery, but probably I can kill, the other person's heart in the other equipment if I like to do that. So I thinking about that when we're talking about the responsibility, we can't hiding ourselves behind the philosophy. I think because it's always the individual. It's me who make, alive all the ethical things. It's me as an actor to doing things. And everybody knows this. But I think it's very good to remind to myself, time about this. And I'm looking for a little bit, some concrete example which might help to us to understand that where is the limit. Example about behaving harmfully. And I think about an example, if I'm saying as a practitioner to the other person, hey, you are totally shit, go and kill yourself. Is this harmful, or is this help to the other persons to doing better things, going to looking for the truth or something like that? And the other example, what I got it to my mind, example that, is it okay to start the relationships with your student or your client? Is it fine? I'm just think about that. Some, the daily examples might help to us to understand that the limits which we find out this is totally unethical. We can't accept this kind of behaving, or do we? That was my point.
Thank you. And Ora, yeah.
Instead of saying we are offensive or aggressive, let's say that we are challenging. We are calling into questions. And this is done also by psychotherapy in all its form, whether behaviorist, psychoanalytic, or whatever. We are challenging the existing beliefs or values or emotions or whatever. But challenging can be done in various ways. And I wouldn't recommend anybody to be the counselor of Socrates or of Nietzsche on person to person, because they were very, very aggressive persons, and we should be aware of that. And there is a matter of responsibility. Any moment, every moment, it's not a methodology. Every moment when I talk to a person, when I talk to my child, to my husband who came to the room, and to everybody, every moment I am responsible. I can make mistakes and fail, but every moment is a question of responsibility. Am I harming or am I? And Leon, we are not always aware that we are harming somebody else. We are not always aware, and we should be open to feedback and challenging. I, with my counselor, I always say, I'm going to challenge you. Are you ready for that? Would you accept that? I need the prior agreement to the game. But still, it can be harmful, and we should be responsible. And I think for that purpose, we should have a kind of possibility to discuss with colleagues about what we are doing and to share our doubts and our responsibility and our failures. I think this is very important.
Yeah, Leon, please.
I agree with Ora. Challenge is the right word, I think. And in challenging, there you can cross the border, or you try to cross the border maybe. But what is important is it based on a relationship. There was some time that I said to the woman whom I was in my practice, why don't you commit? Why don't your daughter commit? Why shouldn't your daughter commit suicide? That was her issue. But why? That was challenging. But it was my my feeling that it was possible in our relationship and in that moment. So I was there for her when it was not a good remark. Then I could have restored it, the damage, so to say. So that's very important in such situations. There are situations that there is no relationship, or there is no time to develop a relationship. But in counseling, so to say, when you have a longer relationship, in such situations, you might try it, but very carefully.
Yeah, Aleksandar.
Yes, I think what Leon and Ora have said is really very true. I agree very much with that. And to comment on Pia's question about the absolute ethical standards, I'm a bit hesitant about this concept of absolute standards, because if as a therapist or as a counselor, I impose absolute standards on myself with regard to my client, then this somehow implies that I'm taking my client as an object, that I'm reducing the subjectivity and the equality of my client as an interlocutor and as a person, that I'm taking up a responsibility for what will happen in our relationship single-handedly. And if we look back at the history of psychotherapy, for example, the situations where psychotherapists have entered into romantic relationships with clients, there are very high-profile psychotherapists. Probably the most famous is Jung, right, who had relationships with their clients. And this was a transgression then, almost as much as it is a transgression now. It was not permitted then, but still, these people helped their clients. These people developed specific relationships. The overall outcomes of those relationships were that Regina Jung's first partner became a famous psychotherapist and founded a school in Russia, and all kinds of good developments followed. So I think we need to be a little bit more hesitant about the absolute control which we imagine that we have in our relationships. Yes, for a professor, it is generally wrong to be in a relationship with a student, but is it always wrong? Is it absolutely wrong? Is it unconditionally wrong? I'm not sure that it is. If we say that as philosophers we take our interlocutors as equal persons, then we must give them at least an equal responsibility and equal ability to influence our relationship. If I think that it is wrong to be in a relationship with a client, I've never been in a relationship with a client, but I'm wondering about this theoretically. If I think that it's wrong to be in a relationship with a client, and the client thinks that it is not wrong for us to be in a relationship, should I have a dialogue with the client? Should I consider the reasons of the client? Or should I simply pull the curtain and say, okay, this is a no? Because if I say this is a no, where's the equality? Where's the personality? Where's the discourse?
Do you think imposing a similar kind of ethical limits, but on psychotherapy, is justified at all in light of what you just said?
I don't. As I get older, I increasingly fail to see major differences between psychotherapy and philosophical counseling, and I increasingly do both. So I don't think that there's. Yes, we do need to understand that some things are generally not productive. That generally is entering into relationships, private relationships with clients, is not productive. But then look at the history again. Freud was the first one who claimed that a psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst should have the same approach to their clients as a surgeon, that they should be emotionally detached, precise, that they should never enter into private relationships. And that same Freud analyzed his own daughter. That same Freud socialized with his clients, invited them for dinners, they participated in his business ventures, promoted the psychoanalytic movement. So Paul Verhaag, in his famous book on Being Normal and Other Disorders, writes about Freud and says one of the greatest virtues of Freud was that he often failed to follow his own advice. So I think we need to be a little bit humorous, a little bit, inconsistent in this.
Leon, and then Lydia. First, Leon.
Yes, I don't like the examples. I heard Nietzsche. I think for Nietzsche wouldn't have been a good philosophical practitioner. I hear Freud. I don't think. Then we move. Maybe you know Deleuze and Guattari about Freud. Then we know how sexist Freud was, and we don't know what it have meant for his daughter when we analyze his daughter. So be careful with examples from history. We live now, and we have now our in our global culture we have now our ethical issues, and all of us have thoughts about ethical issues which are in the media now. But if you give an example, give a good one, and not a disputable one.
Okay,
so Freud is a disputable example.
Sorry.
Yeah. Just to follow on what Leon said, Aleksandar, Freud may have psychoanalyzed his own daughter, and this may be the reason he missed on her homosexuality. So this is another point. We may maybe have relationships after with clients when the meetings are over, because from another side, we may have blind spots in being even philosophical, the persons that we date or have other relationship. Sometimes people coming to the practice wants me to be like a lawyer or a friend. They completely misinterpret the setting or the relationship. And let me add something. I don't think that it's a reciprocal relationship, or that the responsibilities are shared. Your client does not have the same responsibility towards you as you have towards him or her, you know. So the situation is not completely mutual. It's not a meeting in which you share your problems and he shares his. So you have more responsibility that we should maybe define better with regard to the people who come to see you. Even in the fact that they pay you, you know, even in that fact. So the relationship is not completely reciprocal. But maybe when the meeting is over, and especially in philosophy, we don't need to have the same precautions as psychologists maybe need to have, because we keep the discussion more on a rational level, more. It's also emotional, but rational, and exchange of ideas. In that point, in that point of view, I see what you mean, Alexandra.
Mm-hmm. Alexandra, do you want to respond at all, or shall we move on?
Yes, I emphatically disagree with Leon's comment that Freud is a bad example. I mean, Freud is a paradigmatic example, and we can judge any example as being either good or bad depending on whether it fits with our values or not. And there's absolutely nothing in our current media, values, ethics that qualifies as superior to the ethics of Freud's society. So this is a value discussion, which I think would not be productive. But yes, to Lydia, we don't have reciprocal relationships, but we do have an equality as persons. And as I said, I wonder to what extent we can hold to certain ethical principles as absolute, uncritical. I'm just mentioning these examples not as justifying the general policy, for example, of becoming involved with clients. As I said, this is generally recognized as being unproductive. But to what extent can the principles be absolute? Absolute, uncritical. To me, absolute is the same as uncritical. Because we do need to challenge situations. As Leon and Aura said, yes, asking someone in a practice about suicide and asking why your daughter shouldn't commit suicide. For most psychotherapists, speaking from an orthodox psychotherapeutic point of view, this would be a no-no. This would be a major professional mistake. But it's not, as Leon said. Sometimes this is necessary. Sometimes you have to challenge the client. Sometimes you have to sort of stray from these absolute principles because you judge certain things to be required, to be necessary. And that's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I want to add something. I'm sorry that I don't think that we never, I don't think that we ever, in the guidelines that we had till now, that we ever prohibited personal relationship or friendship. Sometimes you have a friend that really comes to the philosophical counseling or philosophical discussion. It's different in that sense from psychotherapy. You know, we are more open. We never address this question. It never seems like a problem. It may be a problem, let's say, for a private teacher having an adolescent. Of course, you don't want to mix things up. So this is why I'm suggesting that while you have the discussions, there won't be maybe sexual or emotional relationships, but friendship after that, or even before that, I think it's possible because it's philosophy and not psychology.
Mm-hmm. May I propose, I think, okay, I'll give a quick word to Aura, and afterwards I propose that we look at some of the questions that we have in chat. And afterwards, for closing, I'll give each of you another turn to kind of summarize your conclusions. Yeah, Aura, please.
We have to remember that psychotherapy developed these ethics because there are theory and practices involved with sexuality and with dependence and sexual indirect interpretation, etc. So they have to defend the client and themselves from possible harms. But the harms that and they are quite obsessed with the harm caused by sexual undue relations. But I think that the harms that people may cause in both in psychotherapy and in philosophical counseling can be, controlling other people's mind. And this can be done not only by aggressive questioning or challenging, it can done also by persuasive and seductive ways of working. And I saw some of our colleagues trying to do that. And I think that this is as dangerous, as harmful, can be as harmful and as unethical as spontaneous sympathy and love relations between counselor and counseling.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aura. Yeah, I think it's a good moment for us to just see what do we have in the chat. Just a moment, I'm trying to open it so I can see the questions. Okay. Okay, yeah, it's loaded. So let me go to the beginning. So
first question at Sari M. What about the difference?
Yeah, what between the therapy and therapeutical, or method and outcome? Okay, let's maybe do the following. So shall we just, all of us, all the panel, shall we read all the questions in the chat, just take a minute, and then each panelist, if they would like to answer one of those questions, they can volunteer to do that, maybe more time efficient. Okay, so to the panelists, if you'd like to answer one of the questions or comments in the chat, can you please raise your hand? Yeah, Leon. Okay, I lost the sound. Is it just me?
Okay, yeah. He asked, do we have any responsibility to develop real philosophy in philosophical practice and to distinguish from other professions? This reminds me of the philosophy of Levinas. As we know, to Levinas' first philosophy, ethics is first philosophy. And I think to say it better is, before we philosophize, before we start thinking and philosophizing, there is ethics. We are in this relationship, and ethics, morality happens. I think this is that's the basics for us philosophical practitioners to realize that. And the question of challenging and harm and doing harm is involved in this. So yes, we must have a typically philosophical responsibility. We do have it, and we also have philosophers who have thought about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyone else would like to put anything else in the chat? And yeah, apologies, we cannot see at the moment the YouTube chat, so the participants can look at it later if they want to.
Yeah, your microphone. Okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'd just like to say a few words about this Sari's questions. What about the difference between therapy and therapeutical or method and outcome? I think this is the main, the questions what people used to asking, in the philosophical practice as well. Probably, you have in the same in the other countries as we have in Finland. That example, when you are a therapist, you're doing with the therapy, there is some kind of the caring guarantee behind, and the very strong the control from the society. We're calling that in Valvira. I don't know how to translate it in English. Sorry, this organization. And this is, some kind of the political way to the organizing these kind of professional skills and how the people are using them in society. But what is the therapeutical? I actually, by myself, I believe very, very strongly that the philosophical practice and these kind of things, what we are doing, can really care and comfort the people. And I think it's the wonderful thing. And it's very difficult to sometimes to separate these lines, that what is the difference between therapy and therapeutical aspect. The one way is to look at that is how the society organize things, but the other way is in the practical, when we are doing things with the people, they are always, mix it together more or less. It's difficult to make the differences between these, but I hope the others can comment this, because I think this is, important questions. And usually people, when they start to practice and studying the philosophical practice, this is usually most of these first questions they made out.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Good point.
Thank you. Yeah, Aleksandar.
I think this question of philosophical responsibility and related questions, some other questions asked in the chat, may have something to do with this phenomenon which we develop in a counseling relationship, which is a phenomenon of transference and counter-transference. It is the same phenomenon which they have in psychotherapy, where transference is the relationship which the client develops towards the counselor. It is the projection of various important relationships which the client has, most typically the relationship between the client and a potential or past lover, or the client and the parent. And then the client often projects those relationships to their relationship with the therapist. This is transference. And counter-transference is the opposite relationship which the therapist develop towards their clients. We all have our own problems, our own issues, our own unresolved questions which we subconsciously project towards our clients. So the debate which we are having now, I think, is the same as a debate which psychotherapists have had about transference, because traditionally psychotherapists believe that transference should be explained away. That when I see that a client has a transference towards me, I should explain to the client that this is false, that this is a projection of their other relationships. Modern psychotherapy has dispensed with this idea, and since Yalom, at least, since Yalom's major book on group psychotherapy, it is now accepted that transference should be cultivated rather than dispersed, that we should use transference, the projections, the emotional relationship which the client develops towards us, as a lever by which to move the client, to influence the client, to help the client change. This is the psychotherapeutic. Now, to what extent does that apply to philosophy? Should we go one step back and explain away the transference? Should we see that as a burden in terms of responsibility, philosophical responsibility? Or should we use transference, embrace transference, and work with it as social capital with the client? In both cases, we will have costs, theoretical and value costs in terms of responsibility which we encounter. And I think this largely depends on what kind of persons we are, what kind of values we have, and what kind of personal approach to philosophical counseling we have. I don't think we can uniformly answer that question.
What do you think about the point that was raised earlier about the asymmetry of power, which also exists in philosophical practice as well as in psychological? And
I think there's always I think there's always an asymmetry of power in any relationship. Just as Lydia mentioned, blind spots. There are blind spots in every relationship. Whatever you do, there are blind spots. Should we allow the asymmetry of power and blind spots to inhibit us from being the most effective and the most productive? I don't know. I think it's a case by case basis. I think we need to consider each case separately and ask ourselves what our inner conscience, our what our conscience, what our values tell us individually. I'm not sure we can answer this in a generalist way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Aura?
I think you take for granted that the psychoanalytic theories of transference and countertransference are valid theories, and I'm not sure about that. So I don't know whether we have to look at the things from this perspective. Maybe we can look at other perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lydia? The microphone.
Sorry, Lydia, microphone, please.
I think that if we stick to the educational vision of philosophy and philosophical practice, we get out of that narrow and theory defined transference and countertransference. When you have a teacher, he has a certain aura of authority. Good teachers do everything to diffuse that and to try to have a more reciprocal relationship, even in the service of teaching better. What Ora said before about being persuasive and trying to have followers, this is of the signs of the guru. Teachers has to be very, very proactive in avoiding that, in showing their, weaknesses and mistakes and showing themselves as a human being that errs and is part of the dialogue and all the time being active on that. Now, if we take the educational vision for the meeting, so we have not transference and counter-transference. We have a problem that you are receiving money, you are considered to have the knowledge, you are considered to have authority. And as a good tutor, let's say, in Oxford, or a good French teacher of languages to an adolescent, you try to avoid for the adolescent to give sexual examples when you teach French. Of course, you are being aware that the adolescent has a crush on you. You don't come with short skirts. You keep your distances. You are sensitive about that. You try really to teach French. The same in the setting. You are a philosophy teacher, and it's more restricted than in a classroom. So I don't know if the transference model is the right one. The authority model is the right one, and we should diffuse it without creating too much familiarity that would put the client not at ease, But you're right, Alexander, because it's philosophy, we don't have one general rule, absolute rule, and it's very important questions, as Ora said, to have the possibility to discuss among ourselves when the barriers are too strong, when we can open, when, and these limit cases in which we really don't know what to do to diffuse, as I would say, our authority. And this is what I meant. It was a poor choice of word to push, towards autonomy. That means, all the time to make the client aware that he has all the tools, he is independent, not to invade. I really think, Leon, as you said, we really have to develop, and I see a book here, I see an anthology that Alexandra can actually develop, really developing an responsibility in the field and defining new terms, new tools, new problems of this field.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. So we need to start wrapping up shortly. I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to say a few words, to wrap up our discussion, and what you've taken out of it. And just 2 points that I would like to propose to maybe comment on if you want, or you can comment on something else, is after having this conversation. Do you think that it is still it may be a fruitful activity to discuss the question of responsibility of a philosophy practitioner together at all, or it should still reside with an individual, with a person? And also, second thing, whether we can at all talk about such a thing as responsibility of philosophy practitioner outside of a historical and cultural context. because we're, for some of the examples that have been raised, something like, looking at the behavior of somebody like Socrates or Freud, it's clearly removed from our present time. Question is whether it's still relevant. Yeah, but otherwise, please feel free to comment on anything you would like in this conversation. A couple of minutes to each of you. And Pia, I think you had your hand up. Yeah, let's start with you.
Okay, very shortly, because we have a very little time. Absolutely, this panel conversation, demonstrated that we really need more talking about this issue. And I think probably, I don't know exactly, I don't have, any concrete proposal that should we open some kind of ethical board, international ethical board or something like that, with probably preparing things. And I think also that it's important that we might find some, the good, examples from our field, not, from psychology, but in the philosophical practice field, because all of us, we have a lot of cases what might, the open and actualizing these kind of questions. And the one thing is that we talk about the responsibility as a relationships between me as a practitioner and the clients. But I think it's also very important that we're talking about responsibility between colleagues. That's also very important part of our action. Don't forget it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Aura.
Yes,
your mic is off.
Responsibility between colleagues is important, but the wealth of the others is still more important. And as I, studying psychology, found out that sometimes solidarity between colleagues is on the account of others, the society or the client or the patients. And I think we should be very much aware of that. And we are not just, that's why I'm not enthusiastic about ethical codes, because ethical codes, first of all, defend themselves, and I don't like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Who else would like to? Lydia,
Microphone, please.
Can you hear me? The point about the relationship between the colleagues is very, very important, I think. You see, it has been in the past and it is in the present, because this movement first is bringing people from a variety of backgrounds in philosophy. Philosophy itself is not a unified discipline anymore, almost, between analytic philosophy and continental philosophy, and the importance of the history of philosophy, etc. Now, philosophical practice in itself has been even more varied, and many people has brought other disciplines as well, the arts. There was one question in the chat about theater and literature and other forms of arts and psychology and many other things. So we have a very important question to address. Should we be tolerant of everyone that comes to the movement, if he has an MA or a PhD, and towards the values, methods, and uses that he does of philosophy? Should everything called philosophical practice ask for tolerance and acceptance? Or is it our role as philosophical practitioners with some experience to say to the person, listen, what you're doing is not faithful enough to philosophy. Maybe you should call it with another name. Maybe you should be a little bit precise about what you're doing. Maybe it's a hybrid thing. Why go into the psychological thing? Why go into the art? Why call it therapy? You see, so I think we should have an open discussion, not a personal one, but open discussion about that, so that people sometimes would brand themselves in a way that will be helpful to the public, but not necessarily philosophically. We should be more clear about that, because sometimes in the national association or international congresses, people sometimes have these opinions about what the other do. and to think how we can politely and effectively convey these to others and have a good discussion about that is important. And the basic decision is, should we be pluralistic? Even if, you know, it's always some kind of marriages between philosophy and other things, or, you know, like the Hinayana in Buddhism and the Mahayana in Buddhism, yes? Or should we be a little bit more quarrelsome about that? So I would like to hear your opinions.
Thank you. Yeah, Leon?
Yes, philosophy is a multiplicity, and philosophical practice is a multiplicity. So probably also one professional code globally is not possible. But maybe it's on a national level, sometimes possible, or on a level of an association, of a philosophical society. But as a global community, as we are very loose, and I think it's okay. So we respect our multiplicity, and we must use, and we do, our communication forums, so the international conferences, and so next year a responsibility must be a huge item there, I think, a huge issue. We have some journals in the world about philosophical practice. I think maybe more philosophical practitioners must read those journals. There are very interesting and important discussions on the journals, but how many of us read them? So maybe we must have a digital, an online journal. Maybe someone want to be the editor of it. Maybe some of us want to be the editor board. So I think an online journal will promote our discussions. The discussions take place, but they are not very well shared in the community of philosophical practice.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And Aleksandar, do you want to say a couple of words, just because you haven't exercised your right yet?
Yes, I think I agree with most of what everybody else has said. I think we had a good discussion today, and the one question that continues to puzzle me is the question of what kind of a role a personality plays in whether someone can be a counselor or not. There's a hard question which is rarely asked, and that is the question of, can anyone be a counselor if they fulfill formal criteria? What role does the personality play? You know, I was recently in a position where in a training program I had to ask a person to drop out because of the values which were incompatible with the values of the thing that the person was training to do. And I wonder, many people who run various training programs do that. They do this either tacitly by failing someone, or openly by saying directly, you should not be doing this kind of job. What mechanisms do we have, if any, to formalize criteria for who can be a practitioner? Because basically all of the empirical studies show that whatever kind of counseling one does, whether it's psychotherapy or philosophical counseling or any other type of counseling, the success depends primarily on the personal relationship between the counselee and the counselor, not on the school, not on the discipline, not on the degrees, on the personal relationship. And that means basically on the personal qualities of the counselor. Now, this is a huge topic, and I'm not sure that it can be tapped in a systematic, theoretically rigorous way. But this is something that bothers me. And I think any kind of responsibility, the buck in discussing responsibility, the buck always stops with the person, with the personality, with personal responsibility.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're running out of time here, but thank you very much for all your contributions. It's been extremely interesting, and I do hope that it's just the beginning of this longer conversation. I'm sure it's not the start, yeah, but I mean at this point, yeah. Yeah. So Lydia, is there anything urgent you still want to add?
Yes, it's urgent. I want to thank you very much for an outstanding facilitation of this meeting. Really, I know it's not easy to do it online like that. You did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Well, and thanks to Sergey for organizing it. And is there anything you would like, Sergey, would like to say to finish this session?
Yes, thank you. It's very, very pleasure for me. Our event has come to an end. Thank you all of participants. We have now some short break before the next event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.